All right, good morning, everybody. And thank you for joining us for this exciting new event, Politics and Eggs. My name is Chad Wolbers, and I am President and CEO of Unity Point Health, Findlay Hospital. And I currently serve on our board here at the Chamber and on our executive committee as our advocacy chair. We hope everyone had a chance to grab a picture with Admiral Franken before the event. You will all receive a copy of that in the near future, and if time allows, we'll have some pictures afterwards too. We'll welcome the Admiral to the stage here shortly for some brief remarks and then open up the discussion for some Q&A. Additionally, you notice on your tables there that you have a wooden egg branded for today's event. Once our Q&A concludes, you'll have the opportunity to grab one of those eggs and bring them to the front for the Admiral to sign. But before we begin, I want to thank our legislators, and I must say, Admiral, you've brought out our legislative brass in full force. This has been our best attendance, so much so that we have a separate list. So on that note, I would like to welcome Susan Farber from our City Council. State Representative Lindsay James. State Senator Pam Yoakum. State Representative Charles Eisenhart. We have County Supervisor Jay Wickham. Looks like a family reunion there. Wonderful. And then Anderson Sansi with our school board. All right. We also want to recognize our sponsors that make this day a reality. So our ultimate sponsors are Dubuque Bank and Trust, Midwest One, TH Media, Hotel Julian Dubuque, Q Casino, and Medical Associates Clinic and Health Plans. We also have our platinum sponsors we wish to recognize, the Anderson Corporation, Cartograph, Collins Community Credit Union, Digital Dubuque, Envision, Fidelity, Grand River Center, the Holiday Inn of Dubuque and Galena, John Deere, Mercy One, Queen Bee, Town Square Media, US Bank, and last but not least, Unity Point Findlay Hospital. A little housekeeping before we get into things here. On your table, you'll see that we have the Tri-State Mayor's Breakfast coming up on Friday, December 2nd from 9 to 10 right here at Hotel Julian Dubuque Ballroom. And we hope to see you there. And you can sign up by using the QR code on that placard or by visiting the Chamber website to hear from local leaders across the region. So now a bit more about our special guest, Mike. Can I call you Mike? Mike grew up working with his father's small machine shop where he ran a lathe, did welding, and helped with general implementation repair. He was a hired hand for neighboring farms until at the age of 17, he began a 3-year stint working at a slaughterhouse in Sioux Center, Iowa. He obtained a Navy scholarship in 1978 and graduated in engineering from the University of Nebraska. He saw sea duty in 4 Navy destroyers, a destroyer squadron, and an aircraft carrier. He deployed frequently to the world's hotspots and was the first commanding officer of the USS Winston Churchill. He has significant Pentagon experience beginning with a legislative tour with Senator Edward Kennedy, and then multiple strategy, policy, and planning positions involving the Indo-Pacific, the Middle East, Europe, and Africa. And now, as you know, he's running for U.S. Senator. Please give a warm Dubuque welcome to Admiral Michael Franken.
Hi, everyone. Just so you know, Sioux City is my home now, and like Dubuque, it is a river city, and like Dubuque, it is the fulcrum upon which 3 states sit. So by collateral duty for Mayor Scott, and I'll do this for Brad as well, to the best of my capabilities, your mayor, energize the 3 states, so the 6 senators and the 3 representatives on the federal level, which are at your beck and call to generate a energetic business and quality of life and arts and entertainment and holiday spirit here in a multi-state area. This I see as an area for expansive growth. I'm going to give you a slightly different chat today than I normally give on politics and the like. And I've given this brief once before to a foreign policy group in Des Moines here a couple weeks ago. And I believe it was germane as well. We have a tendency to separate ourselves from international affairs here in the flyover states until international affairs come home to roost, and they always do. So I'm not going to give you a rah-rah barn burner speech about politics or any of that stuff, because frankly I'm not that good of a politician. But what I am is just a regular individual. Hi, Julie. And to chat about things that I believe will affect us in the years to come here in the state of Iowa, and including in the agricultural fields. So the message here begins with, these are dangerous times, both domestically and internationally. Unprecedented in that a fledgling democracy overseas stands in the hands of a nuclear aggression 8 time zones away. I'm speaking of Ukraine. And Vladimir the Impaler is a vengeful, raging autocrat who, true to his word, has promised to deliver his war to America's footsteps. And you may not see it happening here in Dubuque, but it is happening. So these are doubly dangerous times because in the state of America, there's a large segment of the GOP, to include Senator Grassley and his surrogates, who want to play character games. And just for me, depending on where you tune in, I'm either a war hawk one moment, or I'm a naive peacenik the other, which is quite comical, and rather pretty typical of folks who want to play politics in serious times. But this is no game. Our country, our world face threats that we have not seen in generations. And more important than any handshaking or vote chasing that I could do here today is the oath that I swore, 12 times or so, that I will support and defend the Constitution of the United States against all enemies, foreign and domestic. And frankly, I don't have a lot of patience at some stages of my life for non-serious leaders during these serious times. Serious leaders tell the people they serve what they need to know, and what's happening on the world stage, and what it means for their state and for their country, and what to expect in their communities and in their families. And what, if anything, they can do to prepare, to adapt, or to simply stay safe. And this is what we're here to do, chat about a little bit today. So, but before we begin, a little bit about my background. Yes, I'm indeed from rural Iowa, youngest of 9, and from a slaughterhouse to a vice admiral. Education via public schools and engineering and physics, mostly business and international security affairs came later, various grad schools. But only in Iowa can you go from slaughterhouse to MIT. It's a great world. So combat times, from the Cold War, which was a really iffy time, to the tanker wars in the Persian Gulf, to the air war over Bosnia, to the tanker conflicts outside in the Indian Ocean and elsewhere. I was a Commodore, of course, in a combat theater, and in a shooting war, I was a land forces commander in an area 3 times the size of the United States. So those of you who have Army in your blood, well, I had 4,000 Army folks under my charge as well. In Washington, a lot of political military jobs, to include 7 think tanks through the years, jobs in political military affairs, and technical matters having to do with underwater, environmental issues, and a host of other matters. I was the Chief of Staff for the Joint Staff and the Plans and Policies Shop for the full spectrum of this nation's operations in the diplomatic, diplomacy, and development side of the world in worldwide operations. For 2 years, one of the more difficult jobs ever, I must say, was working for the worldwide orders book at the cabinet level for Secretary Rumsfeld, to pushing orders through in the Bush administration. And that is my quiet time with Mr. Grumpy, and I survived that in good standing, although I did lose all my hair. I was the Navy's Chief of Legislative Affairs under Obama in the Appropriations and Authorization shop, so I know how to get bills pushed through, $100 billion bills across the great difficulty that is Washington, D.C. And years later, I was a legislative person for Senator Ted Kennedy, which is an interesting thing for a farm kid from northern Iowa to do. I kicked off this defense agency. If you know those POW MIA flags you see fluttering about, that was the agency that I began as its first director. A great opportunity to work in a bipartisan manner for some important legislative approvals to let the agency do its job of finding remains worldwide and doing some sidebar activity in places like North Korea and for veterans worldwide. I lived on 4 continents, moved 20-some times. My spouse, Jordan, is here, my wife. 2 kids and a military career that went from 1978 to 2017. So as a career military officer, I was a strategist and a diplomat and a science person in disguise, but I'm more of a practitioner than a theorist. And I don't play politics very well, nor do I beat around the bush very well. So let me start where we stand today. For as long as Vladimir Putin has been an active player on the world stage, he has followed a very distinctive pattern. He signals his intentions before he acts, and then he always follows through. This you must know. And he told the world that he would bring the war to America, and he is following through. He began with interfering with the US elections. He actually began further back than that in formulating the next candidate that won in 2016. The second salvo was attacking Ukraine, and then insisting that any kind of external involvement, including that of the United States, prevents a diplomatic solution to that conflict. This is the way he operates. Chicken, egg, always. And the third salvo was the asymmetric warfare, as we call it, and I've got a little experience in that, like attacks at the US airports, like in Des Moines, and with more to come on US hospitals, water supplies, sewage treatment plants, and electrical generating facilities, and the hysteria in various social media platforms. All of those things are yet to come. You can bet on it. So make no mistake that this soiree in a foreign territory that Vladimir Putin did is nothing but a full-throated, long thought-out assault, not just on countries and territories in the region, but on the very idea of democracy itself, which is inimical to what he has intended and actually the machinations of a madman. And how the United States responds to this will be the lens through which the world will forevermore view how the United States defends the ideals that truly built our nation. So if America wants to be that broad-shouldered leadership voice in the world and that purveyor of the international currency of trade and diplomacy, then we must continuously wear that mantle of responsibility. We can't pick and choose when we're going to exercise leadership. We can't waffle like a Chamberlain, but rather we must hold the line for all matters great and small. It is the cost of being an American. We must stand united with other like-minded nations. We've got lots of friends out there. And the more steadfast we stand, the more friends we will engender. And especially in the face of atrocities to humanity. Closer to home, how will what's happening in Ukraine affect us? Well, for Iowans, we can expect the worldwide pandemic response to slow. And the recovery will slow greatly. We will see an increase in defense spending in the satellite nations around Ukraine, especially in Eastern Europe, and that does not help the investment in the domestic agenda to bring those people up and the social structure of those nations. That is money that's spent that could be better used elsewhere. There will be energy shocks, mostly in natural gas, that will continue with undue consumer fluctuations. We can talk about that later. And there'll be a 35% contractions in the output of the nation of Ukraine, the breadbasket of Asia. If you want to know what Ukraine looks like, think of Iowa about 40 years ago. And that will drive up the cost of farming. Since this conflict began in the spring, there'll be some changes as to the diet in areas north of the Sahel, where the World Food Program mostly has given money to people who can't pay for their food, mostly small grains. Those changes in the diet will be mostly in the terms of rice and fish, which those populations will have to figure out. This is a little more in depth than you care to know, but the good news is the invasion didn't happen in the autumn. Then there would be no ability to change those diets, those feed stocks. But in the end, we can expect both higher prices and smaller grain stocks that cannot be made up by other producing countries. America can't change what we grow this year. And the food scarcity abroad will result in insurrections, demonstrations, and potentially violence and martial law in some of these countries. Think Egypt, yet to come. That's why we must rebalance the scales, and that is why we must act as leaders in all matters. And a failure to do so will lead to global unrest. And those ripples, as a resulting that, will be affected here. Make no mistake, the chaos resulting from the invasion of Ukraine is not an afterthought. Chaos is the intent. Chaos is the environment that people like Vladimir Putin and the authoritarians of the world, his contemporaries, work so hard to create, because it is in that chaotic environment that dictators and authoritarians thrive. They thrive on that dissension in society. And there's another way we can change the scales of things. And American leaders have that power to put a stop to it. And all of us, especially the business people in this audience, I hearken back to when my father was working in the machine shop. He had 100% acceptance of everybody. But what he really didn't care for, he came out of World War II, a wounded vet. He did not care for those who made money off the war. And he had a special name for it. It was in Dutch. He was a Dutch and German speaker. And it wasn't a very attractive name. And we as a nation have to look out for this. Much of the cause of inflation today, 54%, the last number I saw from various economic bureaus, is as a result of undue markup in corporations today. It has nothing to do with worldwide energy markets. It is just a simple opportunity to raise the prices without justification. We, as business people, and I'm one of them, we must do better than that. I'm going to skip over a couple of pages here and talk about something else. You know, not long ago in the halls of Congress, they were overflowing with House and Senate members who were gifted in international security, or they were scientists, or they were dedicated public public servants with military records and diplomatic records and humanitarian records, and business records. They were State Departments and teachers, regular teachers, who made their life's work a curiosity and their passion a continuous education. We don't see that much today. What we have are professional politicians whose life work it is to be a politician. Chuck Grassley calls himself a farmer. Chuck Grassley left the farm in 1956. That's like me saying I'm a slaughterhouse worker. I last worked in the slaughterhouse in 1979. I'm not a slaughterhouse worker anymore. I'm not a farmer anymore. I'm not a welder anymore. I can do those things. Actually, I probably can't. I know I can't drive a combine anymore. I tried to drive one 4 days ago. My gosh, it's got complicated. What we shouldn't have in America, though, are professional politicians. They have led us into the dissension which we experience today. And it's less of an issue here in Dubuque because it's an urban population. But in small town Iowa, where you don't have the dilution factor amongst the parties, the coffee clutches, the golf foursomes, the pews at church become awkward. We can't have this in society. So, far from the doctor or the farmer, but rather we have the ones, we should be looking for our brightest minds and our best ideas. And we shouldn't be fundraising off being a politician. And we should have enough 21st century knowledge that we just don't muddle through. And we shouldn't have this artificial falsiness. We should be real people elected in office. And my job is to hopefully introduce a little bit of this as your next senator. And you know, just so you know, here's a few things about going to conflict. What surely will happen in the next 2 weeks as we narrow in on this is attacks of my service will happen. It's what happens in politics today. They say, what's a person's strengths? And we go after those strengths. If you're a teacher, they'll hit you up on CRT. If you're a mayor, they'll say that your town was decrepit and full of crime. If you're a police chief, they'll say you're a committer of violence. If you're a humanitarian, you're a tree hugger of no value to society. It's what's done in politics today. Just expect it. For me, I'm a military officer of long standing, the most senior person in the state of Iowa, and I think I have probably no more years in combat than all the Republicans combined, but that's neither here. Here's when you go to a conflict with another nation, you should be able to have a discussion about that other nation. You should have, hopefully, at least visited it or know somebody who's visited. You should read a book about it. You should have gotten to know some of its people. And for every nation, we should study their celebrated history, their geography. We should even know their poetry, which tells you what they wistfully worshiped in years past and where their North Star currently resides. This is a truism. And I believe for every narcissist holding court while holding the world hostage, the adage that your mom holds true. The bigger they are, the harder they fall. But I also believe that the more difficult it is for the leader to swallow their pride, the more likely it is that they will choke on it. This goes for those in America and those overseas. And as a former sports guy, I believe there's always somebody faster and stronger than you. And that's a good thing, because what tyrants fail to understand is that the key to victory lies not in showy bombast or sick criticism, but in self-control. And who can be more pragmatic, more level-headed, more patient, and more understanding in life? Those are the important qualities. And I believe in my oath, and I believe in fighting for this country and for its people. And I believe for everyone who throws a punch, there should be 10 peacemakers at the ready to restore the balance and make things right. Indeed. And to close, these are serious times, folks. And the modern threats call for modern scholars. And for games, well, those are kids, and for candidates who fail to take the cue to exit right when their past due date has long since passed. And for the safety of the world and the security of the nation, America must reclaim its position on the world stage. And we're doing that slowly. But to accomplish this, we must come together with a very simple and single policy fact. And that is, you must vote. And you must get people that you know to vote. Without that voice, you're going to be drowned out. And by harboring that vote and restricting that ability to vote, we are hurting the future of our nation. And we must concentrate on that one issue. So vote strategically, vote empathetically, vote for your community, vote for your kids, vote as wish you were planting trees under whose shade you will never walk. Okay? And vote for leaders with curious minds and a global view that is really necessary to steer this ship of state. Okay, now a bit of happiness. Questions, please.
All right, do we have any questions out there? I've got a couple here in the can. Oh, there we got Anderson here.
Yes, sir.
First of all, thank you for the inspiration and sharing your authentic voice. I love how you started off by saying we're in dangerous and serious times, and I want to add to that to say we continue to be in dangerous and serious times, specifically for Black and brown communities. And so although your context was in what's going on in different countries, many Black and brown communities still experience those tragedies today. And Dr. King in the 60s talked about that in his time, saying for Black and browns, it's worse off for them, and 60 plus years later, things are still worse off for Black and brown communities. So I guess when we talk about leadership, I'm curious, when you think about 60 years, this is in the hands of both parties, right? Nothing has gotten better. What can Black and brown communities specifically expect from you as a leader moving forward?
Well, for the recent Black and brown communities, people of color, people of a different religion, people of a different thought process, people from a different culture, I'm a big fan of a comprehensive immigration plan. And I think in 2023 ought to be the year that the administration pushes this through. Something very similar to what we had in 2013, I believe. That was an 85% solution. And it failed because of partisan politics. And what has brought us to this divisiveness that we have today, and the true mess that is the southern border. For the long-standing black and brown communities, people of color, people of a different look that have been persecuted and ill-treated through the decades. I'm a big fan of the Clyburn Bill, where the infrastructure that the nation builds should concentrate on those areas that have economic insecurity, which includes, so we know, much of rural Iowa. Matter of fact, more than 50% of rural Iowa, to include also the areas where predominantly people of color live. And that alone will be exceedingly helpful. I'm also a fan of educational opportunities and to make education much more affordable and to ensure that we have the social structure and the public health efforts to bring people up, to make them live longer, to make them more productive, and to make equanimity or equilibrium, equality across all aspects of house buying, property ownership, and access to health care. In the military, we're quite a bit farther ahead in the equality of all people than what civil society is. And I think we can learn a lot from how the military has viewed equality. And some aspects of this could be pulled into what I live every day for many, many years. Next, please.
Other questions?
So in Iowa, we really don't have treatment like long-term for mental health. And I know our family has had a lot of struggles in that area, and just wondering what can be done to create safe places for people to recover.
Sure. So, multifaceted. We had an intention in this country in the 70s for all the right reasons to change the manner in which we treat brain health. And addiction was part of it. And we set about this pattern, and you know what? It didn't turn out the way we thought. So Iowa today is on the lower quadrant of treatment of mental health. And I have a host of stories in my travels around the state of missed opportunities to treat those most wanting. And it is at the very top, there's two underappreciated qualities of a politician. One, empathy. You gotta care. You've gotta care as much for those you've never met as for those you know. And that's a truism. My mom used to talk about that. Secondly, leadership. It takes leadership. And sometimes it's unpleasant. Sometimes you have to pull society on. And here's an example of that. When we talked about the implementation of GPS, global positioning, how many people do you think sitting around the big rectangular table in the US government wanted GPS to be bought and paid for? Nobody was the answer. But Applied Physics Laboratory and the Navy research people said, we really need this because it gives us this international timing signal that we'll know where we are and we'll be able to communicate. And from that, we're not so sure what's going to happen, but we think a lot of great things are going to happen. And we made, in essence, taxpayers pay for it. And it's a worldwide gift for America that we gave the world today. And I think it'll be here forever. Now, that's leadership. That's long-range vision. We lack that, and we really lack that in the state of Iowa. From mass transit to mental health. And the suicides in this state, which go up, the availability of firearms with irresponsible ownership is part of this. Few numbers. 78% of the firearm deaths in Iowa, and they've never been higher, is as a result of suicide. And 90% of people who attempt suicide and fail never attempt it again. The problem is, if you attempt suicide with a firearm, 85% of the time you're successful. And you don't have an opportunity to not try it again. So that's a bit of society as well. Second and third order effects of being an irresponsible politician. You've got to have vision and you got to be a leader. And if you want to have treatment, that's necessary. And not have your daughter who gets picked up by the police and you're heartfelt and hopeful that she's finally going to get the treatment she does. And she gets dropped off at the mental health facility and they say, hey, listen, we don't have any providers. We don't have any beds. She can spend the night here, but we're going to release her tomorrow morning with the mental health checklist and told her to go see her private practitioner that she probably can't afford to see. Ladies and gentlemen, this is America. This is a lack of leadership and empathy on the leader. And we've got the uber wealthy and a $1.9 trillion tax cut that resides in the 0.25% of 1% of the taxpayers who now no longer have to pay that tax. And your generation, that 16-year-old who's suffering from mental health, her treatments, his treatments are going to be curtailed because of the debt of this country, compliments of the Trump tax cut. Implications, 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 implications. Vote. And vote leaders who give a hoot.
We do have a question that we want to get asked as on behalf of the chamber. American Airlines' last flight out of Dubuque came last month, and we currently have no scheduled service to a major hub. This is a huge blow for economic development and our work to attract and retain Dubuque talent. How would you work to support Dubuque as we restore this needed service?
Yeah, so, I mean, I was going to do some quick reading to catch up on this topic before I got here, and I got waylaid by other things. But, so part of this is, I spent a lot of time in legislative affairs, didn't ever intend to. I thought I'd be a lab rat someplace making transistors or something and end up in legislative affairs. What the hell? But part of this is as the airlines work to be reimbursed for providing less than profitable locations, they get a stipend. And they often retract back as deliberations for that location come to the discussion table in committee. This is behind closed doors. And oftentimes they do these things that try to push up more money from the tax carrier. In the interim, they could care less what happens to your business environment. They could care less that you've got some corporation here that's going to move because they don't want their corporate executives to have to drive in from Cedar Rapids. Or where's the next one? Rochester. Frankly, that's just the cost of them doing business and getting a bigger stipend. Here again, we could use some leadership, and sometimes you have to be a bit dictatorial about things. And this is a growth market. It's going to be a doubly growth market. And here's the oddity. I live in Sioux City. They got the same problems you have. And every time I fly into Sioux City in one of those RJ jets, it's packed. It's packed to the gills. We fly to Denver, we fly to Chicago, and get on a bigger airplane, and the doggone thing's empty. But yet, every time we fly into Sioux City, it's packed to the gills. And yet, they're going to retract service from Sioux City. I don't quite get it. What I see, what they're going to do, doesn't compute. And what that tells me in the business world is they're trying to lever a better deal. I don't exactly know what I'll do to help you, but I know how the business works. And I may not be able to work this issue, but I'll be able to work other areas to get American Eagle to get their asses back here.
Other questions? We have time for maybe one more.
I'll try to be more pithy, sorry. A very unwise man told me that a science person will never give you a yes-no answer because it's never right. They want to explain it? Go ahead.
First of all, thank you, Commander Franken, for your service and your continued service as a as a candidate for civil.
That's nothing.
So, science, I am a 32-year veteran of teaching science and technology in public schools. I'm a product of Iowa public schools from elementary through college and graduate school. When I was in school, we had something called Eisenhower funds that helped pay for extensive science education, which interested me in science, and thus I became a science teacher. Over the past 32 years, I've seen the funding for science, for the sciences go down. And my concern is, and you even mentioned it, was in today's day and age, conflicts and war is fought in a different manner through cybersecurity, cyber attacks, things like that. What ideas do you have to help keep America and the state of Iowa in the lead technologically
Sure.
with the changes that are happening?
Well, the best quality we have going for us here is human capital, people. Iowans have great inventiveness. We've got great skills. We've got a great history. Fabulous Iowans. And we've got this expansiveness. This is a state that educated George Washington Carver. This is a state that has the oldest mosque. This is a state that said, well, hell, women can be in the lawyerly business. We have a very progressive undercurrent. But what, as a nation, we should look at, okay, I'll tell you one more quick story. After I retired, I was asked to come back into the Trump administration, pro bono, never took a penny for this, and I headed up the High Technology Task Force that looked at how other entities, nations, syndicates, nefarious actors, terrorists, would attempt to overthrow, dishevel the United States through asymmetric means. Think cyber, space, data manipulation, mass hysteria, chemical, biological implementations, assassinations, critical infrastructure denigration, etc. Media manipulation, animation, the whole shebang. Use your imagination. And so I headed up this task force of 18 of our nation's most finest purveyors of that type of activity. Gave them a very high security clearance when normally we wouldn't, and let them go to work. And we created a very extensive, very detailed, very classified report and submitted it to the White House. We can save money in the defense budget and be a safer country, but we're going to have to make some changes. And it won't affect you. It'll just affect the way we do our national security apparatus and architecture. And it's overdue, because tanks don't win conflicts. The tools used for last war are not the tools for the next war. They never are. The bow and arrow goes out of vogue. Things happen. The war over in Ukraine, you see with drones, et cetera, that's the future. That's a money-saving opportunity. We can take the defense budget and we can reapply it to other things and still be better for a country. But some of it is the hardening of us. We need to be stronger internal to ourselves. We need to have a stronger media. We need to be a more diverse media. And we need to be able to call out the truisms, the non-truisms in media and say, you know what, we're going to hold you accountable for that. Tucker Carlson, that is a falsehood and you're being sued for it personally, like we used to do before the 80s, before that was set aside by the Reagan administration. We need an element of that because there's too much lies and deceitfulness going on out here.
All right, with that, thank you, Admiral Franken, and thank all of you for joining us today. Please sign up for the Mayor's Breakfast on Friday, December 2nd. And if you like, grab an egg, and we'll have the Admiral sign that for you before you leave.
Okay.
Take care, everybody. Have a wonderful day. Any other thoughts there?
Yes, so I'd like to finish. Sorry about the Debbie Downer talk, but it was really a discussion about the realisms outside the confines of Dubuque. which have a tendency to reside right here. My vision for Iowa is a very grand vision. We have the ability to have the least expensive, most regenerative, most sustainable energy grid in the nation. And I foresee a future, and it won't happen during my lifetime, but we will be a net negative, a carbon net negative state. And from that, we will have high-speed computing, plasma manufacturing, an industry base and the highest quality of living and wage scale possible right here. We've got half of it with the wind energy. We've got a nascent solar industry that needs to be worked on, and other means of energy production, which will really change us. I foresee the day as well that at these railroad tracks, you're going to have a high-speed commuting train. And your idea of getting into Minneapolis will suddenly be a 40-hour or 40-minute thing on a really high-speed train with leather seats and a quick ride. And you won't think about flying anywhere. You will ride it on a train. Now, that'll be 20 years away, but we can do this, but we need to start on it now. Governor Branstad put the kibosh on it, but it can come back. And I'm happy to be that one to push that in Congress. Thanks very much.